are caught in the SF Vortex.
How are you?
Forget about me, Jack. Worry about yourself. The Shining lives again, and it just might be time for you to check out of your hotel.
I don't think so.
There's another battle against evil as the Warriors of Virtue spring onto the big screen.
You killed anyone today?
Not yet, but wait until we get downstairs.
We cannot let our fears defeat us.
Good call. Otherwise, you'd miss out on what will be the ultimate war room with B5's Joe Straczynski and Sci-Fi's always controversial Harlan Ellison. So, let's get ready to rumble!
Warriors, come out and play!
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to SF Vortex. I'm Roger Lodge, and for the next half hour, we'll find out what's hot and what's not in sci-fi entertainment. You know, it's a big day in the Vortex today because right here in our very own war room, we have producer J. Michael Straczynski, novelist and screenwriter Harlan Ellison, along with authors Herb and Yvonne Solo. They'll be discussing the state of the art and where sci-fi is headed tomorrow. Be there, folks, or be sorry. But first, as always, a few previews. You know, ABC will debut an all-new Stephen King-approved miniseries based on his classic tale of terror, The Shining. You know, it took King 18 years to get this version made. Was it worth the wait? Steven Weber takes over the role made famous by Jack Nicholson in Stanley Kubrick's version, and he's just as claustrophobic and demented as Bad Jack ever was. Check it out. I got one word for you, my friend, decaf. You know, part one of The Shining airs Sunday, April 27th at 9 p.m. If you already have plans, much like me, set your VCRs. This remake will be up for debate in the War Room in May. Let us know if you like it. Elsewhere in the sci-fi universe this week, all new episodes of Hercules, Xena, and the WB's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. On Hercules, our hero is trapped in a collapsed mine with a dying murderer, while on Xena, Gabrielle and Xena must help the Lost Mariner break Poseidon's vengeful curse. And on Buffy, our resident vampire slayer faces down an ancient demon when he pops up in the futuristic world of cyberspace. And finally, both Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry and counterculture guru Timothy Leary boldly went beyond the final frontier when a portion of their remains and those of 23 others were launched into orbit by a Pegasus rocket. The capsules containing their ashes will remain in orbit anywhere from 2 to 10 years. A very fitting tribute to two men, each unique to the 20th century. All right, now, quickly leaping to the big screen for all of you fantasy fans out there, it's Warriors of Virtue. You know that, the cool new movie from MGM, and it features some amazing action sequences, and boy, do we've got a sample for you. Oh. Warriors of Virtue will be in theaters May 2nd. Don't miss it. And now, folks, it's a Vortex exclusive. A surprise guest who can tell us what's ahead for the conclusion of Babylon 5's fourth, or is it the final season? Who is it? Come on. Who knows the show better than its creator, Mr. J. Michael Straczynski? And, folks, he's here. And as he makes his way up through the Vortex, let's preview some scenes from upcoming episodes. And here he is, the man who makes B5 possible week to week. He is creator J. Michael Straczynski. Joe, what can you tell us about the future of Babylon 5? Is there a season 5 in the works?
We're talking to Warners about it now. We don't know. We'll know probably in a month or two.
And where are we going with the story? Can you give us a little preview?
Well, we have to deal with the war back home to resolve. We have to finish a war there. We have to throw President Clark out of office. We're fighting our own guys. And Garibaldi leaves the station never to return.
Oh, interesting. Now, what about the telefilms? You want to give us a little preview?
One is a prequel, which takes place 5 years before the Babylon station is created, and follows the Minbari War. Second one is a generic 4-season story.
Ready to head down to the war room?
Let's do it.
There you have it. Some of Joe's good friends are down there. You folks at home, stick around, because when we come back, we will be in the war room with Harlan Ellison, Herb and Yvonne Solo. It's all when SF Vortex returns.
That's a long drive.
How about a part on me? All right, welcome back to SF Vortex. Joe and I have made it down to the war room, and joining us today, Yvonne and Herb Solo, who together have just written the just-released Star Trek sketchbook. Yvonne is also a writer, producer, and lecturer on science fiction and literature, and author of The Last Conversation. Herb Solo, in addition to author of the sketchbook, is also producer and former head of 3 motion picture studios. In fact, he is the man who hired Gene Roddenberry at Desilu. And let's face it, folks, he needs no introduction. He is Harlan Ellison, probably the most controversial man in all of science fiction. Let's face it, he has more writing awards than Captain Kirk had women. All right, let's get to my first topic, all right? A lot of movies, you see Metropolis, for one, Blade Runner, these are movies that stand out. Give me a movie, a sci-fi movie that you've seen that defines sci-fi in the 90s. Joe?
I'm sorry I haven't written it yet.
It's coming out.
I plan to write it any time now. I've been kind of busy.
Harlan?
Well, I'm in the same boat Joe is. I would have to say the I, Robot film that was written for Warner Brothers around the Isaac Asimov story cycle. It's a brilliant screenplay. Unfortunately, it's only available in a book.
And who wrote that?
I wrote that.
Did you?
Yes.
My stars
My
and garters.
humility is overwhelming
I'm sorry.
tonight.
I learned all from him.
Yvonne, Yvonne, have you seen a movie?
No.
Not yet in the 90s? Nothing?
Nothing.
Herb?
Actually, I'm going to produce what Joe has written, and Yvonne's going to star.
Call my agent back.
You see, the problem is this. We have lost sight of what is important in science fiction films. What they're doing now are cheap tricks. Because Spielberg was able to make so much money with special effects, an entire generation of filmgoers have been gulled and lied to believe that what they really need to see is Eddie Murphy blowing up trucks and cars, and that's what you get in the films. An imbecile film like Independence Day, which is, I thought it was the most boneheaded film ever made until I saw Pauly Shore film. See, that's how I know that we are in the twilight of civilization where Pauly Shore can become a star. And there's nothing available to us now that has the impact of a film like Charlie with Cliff Robertson.
Cliff Robertson won the Academy Award.
Exactly, or John Frankenheimer's Seconds, or 2001, which these are milestones. There's nothing like that now.
See, film began as spectacle. You would go into a theater and watch a train coming at you back when films first began, and that was a big deal. And they went for a time through a period where they had 3-act structure and a real story to it. Now the films have gone back to being huge spectacles. We go in to see things blowing up, and the emphasis on story has been lost to a large degree.
But Joe, it's worse than that, because years ago you would talk about story or who's in it, who directed it. Now you literally advertise how many effects are in it.
Yeah,
You will
exactly.
see the largest special effect ever. So therefore, come to see my film. So forget the story, forget the ideas, as I've said many times, until they come up with a special effect for ideas. We'll continue with the same genre.
They got billboards all over LA at the moment for Volcano, the
Yes.
latest of the natural disaster film here. Irwin Allen, even a stake in the heart will keep him from coming back. And it doesn't say anything. It doesn't even mention Tommy Lee Jones. All it is the coast is toast.
Right.
Yvonne, what do you think about all this?
I think that before the media was so prevalent everywhere, that science fiction, or at least fantasy, was looking into someone else's life. Like Easy Rider, to me, was a fantasy. That's not my life. And so I was stunned and moved and shaken by it when I walked out of the theater. Now, seeing a movie that is supposedly science fiction is, as everyone says, is just a lot of special effects. And it's fascinating, but, you know, for 5 seconds.
Harlan Ellison, let me ask you, what has been the most influential decade, in your opinion, in science fiction?
Probably, well, in terms of the writing, I would say probably the 60s through the 70s. But in terms of film, it's the 50s, because they're just catching up with what was done in science fiction in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The ideas that we're seeing now are so primitive. They're so primary. I mean, they're remaking Earth versus the Flying Saucers. For a while there, we had a chance to break out. They were going to shoot A Canticle for Leibowitz, the Walter M. Miller book. They were going to shoot Roger Zelazny's stories. Now what they're doing is they're coming to Starship Troopers, for instance, 25 years too late. James Cameron already made Aliens, which is all Starship Troopers is. When they finally got around to making Heinlein's The Puppet Masters, it was already 35, 40 years after they had made Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and everybody said, what is this? Well, this is just a ripoff, when in fact Heinlein came first.
Joe, most influential decade, your opinion?
I agree with Harlan because that's my job. And essentially, the 50s were very important for me as a writer because we had Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Day the Earth Stood Still and many other fine films which set the tone for serious science fiction for the first time. And in the 70s, we had more progression to the interior areas and internal areas of science fiction, which we aren't getting these days. Now it's kind of all gone to hell.
Herb?
Well, I agree with the 50s, but I also think that I was really bred on the 60s television because I'm younger than everyone here. The 60s suddenly, especially when we started Star Trek, it was a series, a lot of problems with the series, good things, bad things. It was a series that opened the door to serious science fiction writers. Harlan was a blessing to us to get. Teddy Sturgeon was a blessing to get. We suddenly found Dick Matheson. We suddenly found we had marvelous science fiction writers that came from literature.
And George Clayton
and
Johnson.
George Johnson, Jerry Saul, others. They came from literature and they gave us their knowledge. A lot of writers today don't come from literature. They come from seeing Independence Day or this or that, and that's what they think is science fiction, and that's what they continue to write.
Yvonne?
I got a letter from Arthur C. Clarke the other day, and I'm very happy that he is happy that they apparently are going to do Childhood's End finally, and that to me is quality science fiction. I think that's spectacular. Wow. I would have loved to see iRobot, the thing that Harlan wrote, done, because I've read it several times, and I think, why isn't this a movie? That Susan Calvin is just, I mean, she's so poignant as a character.
The whole problem devolves on, and this is the crux of the problem with films in the science fiction genre, is the studio executives, the people who make the decisions, are know-nothings. It's not just...
Uh-oh. I better go to a commercial quick.
Gee,
we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll try to get Harlan to come out of his shell. Lots more when SF Vortex returns. Welcome back to SF Vortex. We are still in the war room with producer J. Michael Straczynski, writers Herb and Yvonne Solo, and of course, Mr. Harlan Ellison. And Mr. Ellison, you did make the comment before we went to break. Sorry to cut you off. Studio heads are know-nothings. Can you elaborate?
Absolutely not. Let me preamble this by saying I exempt Herb. This is no butt kiss because I worked with the guy and he's got a brain in his head as opposed to these other guys who have puree of bat guano. Now, the problem is that not only don't they know anything about their own business, they're not even fiscally responsible, but they are illiterate. They are virtually illiterate. They will take a script and they will read only the dialogue. And if you have a woman speaking in one page and then she goes out and another woman comes in, they say, how come this woman changed her attitude? They don't bother to read. They know nothing about books, although they like to pretend they do. That's so they can go home and lie to whoever it is or whatever it is they're sleeping with and tell them how important they are. They don't understand that to do science fiction films is not like doing a comedy or a Western. If you see a guy lying out on a butte with a Winchester, you know that the Wells Fargo wagon is going to come down the road in a minute. In science fiction, you have to create a new world every time, and it must be internally consistent. It must be logical. These people don't understand this. They have no respect for the material.
And they've hired Pauly Shore, which that's another
Oh,
comment.
and I thought he was the end of civilization until I saw Chris Farley, who makes Pauly Shore look like Laurence Olivier.
Herb, what do you think? What do you think?
What do I think? Harlan? Love Harlan. I think there's a change, seriously, a change in the process. Years ago, I think most people who were heads of studios or whatever you want to call them, who were responsible for deciding we will do that project, we'll put that person in, that person will write it. They read what they had.
Absolutely.
I mean, they was given stuff, they took it home on the weekend, we had piles of stuff, scripts, books, what have you. There was no echelon, there was no like, someone's here, 2 guys here, 3 guys there, on down the line, where you never spoke, you as a writer, you as a creator, came in, you never spoke to the person who said yes or no. You only spoke to the person now who says no. They can't say yes. So what happens is you get, when you go to a studio, you're talking to a new emissary of yours. If that person doesn't understand what you said or what you want to do, because that person now takes it upstairs while you go home, and you are out of the loop. So it becomes the process. Also, years ago, we had story editors, readers. Readers, we give material, they would cover it for legal purpose. So the legal department got off my back saying, we got to know what they have, what have you, for insurance purposes, what have you. Nowadays, that material is done and goes up to the executive who reads it and, oh, I read the book, it's in 2 lines.
Yeah.
Right.
And a decision is made on that, and I think that's one of the problems.
Joe, what about the collaborative nature of television? What's the advantage there? What do you think?
Well, television or film has a lot of advantages in that there's less money at stake initially. Titanic is $400 million. I could do 16 years of Babylon 5 on that amount of money. And when it costs less, they tend to interfere with you less. We haven't had a creative note from Warner Brothers since episode 2 of year 2. And so for my purposes, it's great. Every so often you hit someone who is not firing on all cylinders, but you have to, as Harlan says, tunnel around them or tunnel under them or climb over them or go around them. And if you're smart enough, you can do it.
Let's check a viewer letter, shall we? It's always
Let's.
a lot of fun. All right, Aaron Moore writes to us, Babylon 5 is one of the most creative and innovative sci-fi shows of the decade.
Person of great taste.
Yeah, this show, she knows what she's talking about. This show sets the new standard for sci-fi drama. What do you see as the creative advantages of working on the small screen, Joe, as opposed to the big screen?
Again, less in the way of interference. You can do more character-oriented stories as opposed to big spectacles all the time. They leave you alone a lot more. If I was had to do Babylon 5 as a motion picture, it wouldn't be as good because you have to do all the pyrotechnics and explosions and the big stuff that you require for a feature film. Now we can focus on the characters. I think it's a much better scenario because less is at risk, there's more freedom, and the writer can run things as opposed to film where the director tends to run things.
Harlan, give me a grade science fiction television writing in the 90s. Give me a letter grade.
Oh, I'd say
Keep me out of it, don't skew it.
a D.
A D.
A D. See, the only thing wrong with that letter is that the writer confuses sci-fi with science fiction.
Yes.
Babylon 5 is not sci-fi. Independence Day is sci-fi. The gathering at Roswell to believe in little green men, that's sci-fi. That's crap. That's the kind of crap that got those people in Rancho Santa Fe killed. They believe this garbage. Science fiction is a tool like the Whole Earth catalog. It's an implement. It is a way of special dreaming. It's a way of looking at the future, and that's what Babylon 5 is, as opposed to, I don't know, the alien autopsy on Fox.
Yvonne, you agree?
I agree with the word. Harlan has enormous respect for the word. I do as a teacher, as a reader even. And when I see people talking, and I don't know what they're talking about because there's no texture in there. I looked at the script. I read the script for the hurricane movie, Tornado or
Twister?
Twister, yes.
Did they say
What
anything?
script?
I
What
mean,
script?
nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I don't
It
even.
was 11 and a half pages long. You got
I mean,
blue stamps.
so there's nothing said. It's not to say that it wasn't beautifully done for what it was, but I don't want to see it. I want to hear something. I want to feel something. I want to know that. I want to know the people that are up there.
Mr.
And
Solo?
I don't see that.
I think the...
How does he get to be Mr. Solo? With,
I
Harlan-
said Mr. Ellison.
Harlan.
3-4 times
Class
Mr.
will add
Ellison.
Harlan.
I came in door with you.
All right, Herb, what do you think?
Thank you very much.
What do you think, HS?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Heidi, baby, sweetie, what are you
Yes,
gonna say?
you used to call me that years ago.
I know.
He used to sit in the studio, there's a studio park at Old Dazzilo. I'm upstairs in my
Well, they let
office.
him in,
He
yeah.
would stand up there and yell, what would he yell?
Harvey, sweetie, can you come out and play? Will your mommy let you come out and play? This
Right.
head of
All right,
Nice,
honey, sweetie,
nice.
I got to take a
Yes,
break.
and
We're
then-
coming
then
right
I'll come
back
back.
with this wacky gang, so don't go anywhere, folks. Lots more when SF Vortex returns. All right, welcome back to Huck Barkin's favorite SF show, SF Vortex. J. Michael Straczynski, I need to know the ultimate purpose of science fiction.
If a culture doesn't know where it's going, it tends to drift and fall apart, as ours has begun to do. The role of science fiction is to point to a spot on the horizon, say that's where we're going, that's the future, we can build it ourselves or let someone else do it for us, and it may not be the future we want to have. It's an optimistic form that says we are going somewhere, there's continuity of species between our ancestors and our inheritors, and we have to build that future.
Yvonne?
I think the purpose of science fiction is to make one think big, expand parameters, and take a look at what we believe and compare it to what life would be like if we didn't believe it.
Herb?
I think science fiction is not at all public. I think it's very private, and I think it tells each of us where we personally are going in the future.
Mr. Ellison?
I go two ways on this one. One of them is a quote from Franz Kafka. He said, "One should never read a book that does not strike you a blow in the head. A book should be like a brick through a window." I think that's what science fiction does. At its best, it makes the status quo be examinable. And I quote from the great Catholic philosopher Taylor Desjardins, who said, it is our job to ascend to the light. That is the job of science fiction, to take us to the light.
By the way, your short story, The Resurgence of Ankle Strap Wedgie,
Yeah.
best short story I've ever read. Thanks for that. All right, that wraps it up for this week's War Room. I want to thank our guests, Herb and Yvonne Solo, Mr. Harlan Ellison, and J. Michael Straczynski. Thanks, guys, for coming. Can you come back again sometime?
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right, terrific.
Tuesday I'll be here.
Okay, we'll
for
see you
lunch.
then. Join us next week in the War Room. We're going to debate the best alien ever. Until then, I'm Roger, out.
Your weekend of wonder continues right now when a colony of super ants enact their ultimate revenge upon mankind. In Phase 4, the dimension of movie magic begins. Sci-Fi Channel next.